So good evening, everybody. As you may perhaps know that I told you at the beginning of the session that we're going to talk about the mental proliferation and how does Buddha actually teach us to cope up with that mental proliferation thing, that process. So that's what we're going to talk about today. So first, I have a question for you. So how many of you have kind of a sense of understanding about what is this mental proliferation like? Is it is kind of a first time terming for you? Have you ever found out this word on a book or somewhere else? Okay, maybe I'm going to actually explain to you this. But all in all, this sutra actually is about how to cope up with the mental proliferation. So mental proliferation means that when you encourage, it's kind of a natural process. So when a thought gets naturally developed in a very short time, then it gets associated with tanha mana ditti, craving, conceit, and views. So when a thought is to get associated, it's kind of a natural thing, and you don't do anything, but you might add things to that, but it's happening all the time, and then that becomes proliferated. So that is the proliferation. But the thing is that since the thought is getting proliferated with tanha mana ditti, or craving, conceit, and views, the effects that could create to our mentality is something that really needs a kind of an understanding. Otherwise, we might be in problem. So that is mental proliferation. But Buddha actually explains, that situation in very specific words in Pali. So we're going to take a look at that later. First, I would like to tell you that this sutra, called Madhupiṇḍika Sutta, the sutra number 18 of Majjhima Nikaya, that was given by a monk called, a venerable Arahant monk called Kaccana, Venerable Kaccana. He was the one who explained the whole sutra in clear terms, but the background thing happened between the Buddha and a recluse called Dandapani. So when Buddha I would actually read a bit about the background. On one occasion, the Blessed One was living in the Sakyan country at Kapilavatthu in Nigroda's park. So then what happened is that Buddha was visiting Kapilavatthu for alms, for Pindapat. And then he met this person called Dandapani. And Dandapani asked a question. His question was, what does the recluse assert? What does he proclaim? So what does Buddha proclaim, or what does Buddha assert about his understanding, about his awakening? And then Buddha gave an answer. Friend Dandapani, I assert and proclaim, I tell you my teaching in such a way that one does not quarrel with anyone in the world, with its gods, its maras, or anybody, in such a way that perceptions no more underlie that person who abides detached from sensual pleasures, without perplexity, shorn of worry, free from craving for any kind of being. Actually, Buddha was explaining the nature of his teachings to this person, Dandapani. Right? So it does not lead to any quarrels. It does not lead to any disputes. His teachings does not lead to any of those things. Right? And he told to Dandapani. And then what happened? Dandapani was very perplexed. He didn't like that. Probably the way that he thought his teaching was meant to be in a different way. So then what happens? When this was said by the Buddha, Dandapani wagged his tongue and raised his eyebrows until his forehead was puckered in 3 lines. Then he departed, leaning on his stick. So he was not pleased about it. Anyway, and then Buddha went back to the temple. At this time, Buddha was staying in his native place, Nigrodharama, Kimbulwatpura. And then the Buddha told this incident to the other monks. This happened, this guy came in, and then he asked me this question, and I told the nature of my teachings. And then monks, they actually asked why. We want to know actually, why do you tell that your teaching, which we follow upon you, would not lead to quarrels, would not lead to any problems, any harmful things? Why do you tell that? And then Buddha says, monks, as to the source through which perceptions and notions born of mental proliferation beset a man. Now, Buddha says all the quarrels, issues, disputes, problems arise as a consequence of mental proliferation, right? And then he explains, monks, as to the source through which perceptions and notions born of mental proliferation beset a man. If nothing is found there to delight in, welcome and hold to this is the end of the underlying tendency to lust, aversion, views, doubt, conceit, and desire for being, ignorance, roads, weapons, quarrels, brawls, disputes, recrimination, malicious words, false speech, and here all the other bad things happen as a consequence of mental proliferation. And then what happened? Buddha, he actually he went inside to rest. And then what happened? Monks really wanted to know this teaching in detail. So they approach a monk called Mahakaccana and then let him know, say, see, the Buddha told this kind of a thing to us, so can you explain to us this teaching? And then Venerable Mahakaccana explains the nature of his teachings, of the Buddha's teachings, which was on not leading to quarrels, not leading to disputes, and all these things. How he explains Buddha's understanding about his nature, the nature of the Dhamma to them, goes this way. He was talking about the mental proliferation and what we can do to cope up with mental proliferation. He takes a stand on the sensual faculties. How many sensual faculties do we have? Sense faculties do we have? Sorry. Huh? 6 sense faculties. Huh? Can you name them? Piece of ear, piece of eyes, right? We have 2 eyes, huh? Piece of ears. We have 2 ears, huh? Piece of nostrils? No, right? That's a nose, right? Nose. And tongue, body, and mind. So 6 sense faculties. So then, when he was explaining how mental proliferation arises, he straight away goes into the sense faculties. Let's take a look at the piece of eyes. How does piece of eyes cause the mental proliferation happen with that sense faculty? Dependent on the eye and forms. So we call chakku and rupa. So the piece of eyes and the images. Dependent on the eye and forms, then what happens? Eye consciousness arises, right? So there is a consciousness happens because of that amalgamation, right? Eye and its resultant forms or images. And then what happens? The mating of the tree is contact. So when the amalgamation of the tree, eye, and then the images or forms, and then the eye consciousness, then because of this amalgamation, then there you would see a contact, right? And then what happens? With contact as condition, there is feeling. when you have a contact, when you have a touch, could be a mental, physical touch, then what happens? You are having a kind of a feeling with that, right? Vedana. What one feels, that one perceives. When you feel something, then you develop that to the next level, that is perception. Then you perceive that. What one perceives, that one thinks about. When you perceive something, then you try to put that thinking into words, right? Think and then put words. Anyway, what one thinks about, that one mentally proliferates. When you take it to the level of thinking, then what happens? You are far more susceptible to the mental proliferation with the sense faculty called I. Now, this is only about I. You could take ears too. So, when the ear and its resultant sound make up ear consciousness, and then what happened? Because of this tree, it causes contact, and then so we call it chakkuncha paticca rupecha uppajjati chakku viññāna. So we could say sotancha paticca saddecha uppajjati sota viññāna. Sota means ears. Paticca saddecha sounds. So because of the amalgamation of ears or ear, and then the sound, that make up ear consciousness. And then what happens? Tinnang sangati passo. Tinnang sangati passo means when you develop, when you take it to when you take the ear and then the sound and then the ear consciousness to a further level, and then what happens? There is a contact. And then what happens? Passa paccaya vedana. Because of the contact, you get to a feeling. Yang vedeti tan sanjanati. When there is a feeling, then you have a perception about that feeling, right? So you're probably going to perceive that, right? Most probably. Yang sanjanati tan vitakketi. When you perceive anything, then you get to think about it. What is this? Because we have a subjective and objective way of looking at things. Let's say I'm going to see this rug, and then not most of the time in that objective perspective, because I have seen many rugs before. So I'm going to compare with the rugs that I already know. So I'm going to bring my subjective knowledge to this rug. Maybe I'm going to ruin the original authentic rug that is in front of me. It's a problem. That's why Buddha always asks to bring your objective. This could be a very different, very unique rug. But we don't get to that point because we are ruining that authenticity with a subjective understanding. That's why when we get up to perception, then our perception might be mostly from subjective understanding. But anyway, then what happens? Because you perceive anything in this process, then you get to think about it. And then what happens? Yang vedeti tan sanjanati. Yang sanjanati tan vitakketi. Yang vitakketi. And then actually when you think about the perception, then you create the mental proliferation, which has the perceptions and notions. Actually, perception and notions consist of mental proliferation. But in the commentaries, the commentator called Buddhaghosa, Venerable Buddhaghosa, he defines this to be something. The mental proliferation means any thought which has craving, conceit, and views. So that is not actually seen on the surface level of this teaching, but then actually that is what happens to all of us. So when you proliferate your mentality of anything, then you get up to this thing. You are far more susceptible to this situation, right? And then what happens? What one thinks about, that one mentally proliferates. When you think about it, then you mentally proliferates, with what one has mentally proliferated as the source, perceptions and notions born of mental proliferation beset a man with respect to past, future and present forms cognizable through the eye or whatever the other sense faculties. So see now where are you going to get ended up? You're going to end up with a lot of past, future, present forms of cognizable, like all those things, about perceptions and notions, perception, notions about the past, future, present, things about your cognizable eye, cognizable ear, cognizable nose, cognizable thing, right? So it leads all of us to mental proliferation, leads us to a lot of troubles because we are coming up with perceptions and notions. Are our perceptions and notions good all the time? Not all the time, right? Yes, we have to actually revisit about our perceptions and notions. Sometimes they might go, most of the time they go wrong because we don't specifically look at them within this spiritual understanding. Okay, now then what happens? The Buddha says, the Venerable Mahakaccayana says, when there is the eye, a form and eye consciousness, it is possible to point out the manifestation of contact. When there is the manifestation of contact, it is possible to point out the manifestation of feeling. There is a manifestation at each stage, right? Feeling. When there is the manifestation of feeling, it is possible to point out the manifestation of perception. When there is the manifestation of perception, it's possible to point out the manifestation of thinking. When there is the manifestation of thinking, it is possible to point out the manifestation of besetment by perceptions and notions born of mental proliferation. So that is what mental proliferation does to all of us. So now what does Buddha ask us to do to cope up with this issue, right? When there is no eye, no form and no eye consciousness, it is impossible to point out the manifestation of contact, right? When there is no manifestation of contact, it is impossible to point out the manifestation of feeling. So I guess what Buddha says at this point is to us to be actually really wise in this process. When you take a form, when you hear a sound, when you smell something, when you taste something, when you touch something, when you feel something, when you take the objects with your mind, we have to be careful, right? So the Buddha tells us the cause of the mental proliferation, because in the Buddhist teachings what we understand is that Buddha asks us to always look at the cause rather than the result, right? So we need to see the cause. Then we know that how the mental proliferation happens. Then we could at least be careful in making not happen, these things in a bad way, in an unwise way, right? Then we will make the mental proliferation lesser than that we might have used to do in the past. So that's what Buddha says in this sutra. So in short, I would say, because of the amalgamation of the senses and their resultant things like the other set of the senses, we call them the pleasures, right? Pleasures, senses and pleasures. So, and then their relevant consciousnesses, then mental proliferation usually gets started. And then what happens? They go to the other levels like contact, and then perceptions, feeling and thinking, and then at the end to the mental proliferation, which has these three things like craving, conceit and views. You can't stop that happening, this process. It will happen, but we can actually reduce this proliferation. You can prevent that from the bad, unwise things like you can reduce the craving part of your proliferation. You can reduce the conceit part of your proliferation. You can reduce the views part of your proliferation, right? So you can't stop this happening, but you can stop the consistency of the proliferation. So that's what this sutra is all about. So now we can move on to a discussion, Q&A. Does this make sense to you, or something really, really irrelevant to you, your perspectives? Have you ever thought of this kind of a thing? Like you increase your mentality, which is called the mental proliferation at the end, and there are some teachings about it from the Buddhism. Have you ever thought of it? Maybe not. Maybe not.
I don't know.
To some point?
Not broken down in that model.
Okay.
I guess I just take from it, if you attach a lot of energy and significance to certain sense pleasures,
Mm-hmm.
positive or negative, they're
Yeah.
going to be more likely to proliferate and occur again and again. And
Mm-hmm.
so if you can be mindful of them and kind of break it down,
Yeah.
right, that'll help you from, or kind of give you more control. And
Like a management, right?
yeah.
Rather you controlling, I think we could decrease the consistency of craving, conceit, and views of our mental proliferation. That's something we could do. That's why Buddha says, where does this come from? See, go to the first cause. The first cause is senses. Now we never think about where does the mental proliferation arise. So that's basically related to the senses. So if we could take care of our senses to the best of we can, then there we have a good management about this thing. So then that is so manifested at the end. If we know that this happens because my senses are not really taken care of by my objective understanding. Does anybody of you know why craving, conceit, and views are so important in our understanding?
It colors the perception.
Yeah, it colors the perception, and it's the basic, unwholesome type of things in a kind of a thought, right? So let's say if you take a thought that you have about something. Let's say you are greedy about something, right? Then if you take that thought, actually, that has craving, that has some kind of a conceit about it, not that massive level of conceit, that has a view, because you think the way that it needs to be done, right? You expect that to be happen the way that you want, right? So Buddha says, reduce the consistency of craving, conceit, and views of any thought. You don't know what kind of thoughts you might be coming up with, but if you can actually reduce, that immoral or evil type of unskilled akusala, right? Unskilled type of your thoughts in the first place, then there is a way out for us to cope up with the rest of the process, which we call the mental proliferation. So why is this sutta called the Madhupiṇḍika? That's a good thing to know, actually. Okay, we'll see. Madhu means honey, right? Pindika is a bowl. Why do the monks in the Sanghayana call it Madhupiṇḍika? When this was said, the Venerable Ananda said to the Blessed One, Venerable Sir, just as if a man exhausted by hunger and weakness came upon a honey ball. Wherever he would taste it, he would find a sweet, delectable flavor. So too, Venerable Sir, any able-minded monk, wherever he might scrutinize with wisdom the meaning of this discourse on the Dhamma, would find satisfaction and confidence of mind. Venerable Sir, what is the name of this discourse on the Dhamma? As to that, Ananda, you may remember this discourse on the Dhamma as the honey bowl discourse. It's a good way of remembering. Anyway, now what should matter to us is neither the sutra nor whatever the people here. What matters to us is whether do we understand this mental proliferation. Have we ever thought of that mental proliferation plays a bigger part of our understanding? If you don't think that it's a bigger thing in your life, then I don't think this will be so material to all of us. But if you think this is actually this is material to all of us, and then there is a way that you could think about how does this happen, how does this affect, how is the effect like, and then how we can prevent this happening in a really bad way. So that's what this sutra is all about. Any questions?
Basically, it also explains the part of the paticca also.
Yeah, the cause and effect. Cause and actually, this is a very important thing. Now, a guy from somewhere in Canada asked me a few months ago, Hamdruo, I have a plan to buy a very nice sports car, which costs like wherein that I have to pay like a down payment of like 50,000 Canadian dollars, and I will be having a hard time after I bought this car. And then, what would you think about the Buddhist teachings about this whole thing? This buying this sports car, whatever. Well, I think you should have asked me a question with your situation. Is it good to buy this car with my situation? Because I would never tell you, because you take out your whole saving part of your bank account. He had only like 51,000 Canadian in the bank account for savings. So you should have asked me, Hamaduru, would it be wise to buy this car with my situation? Rather, you ask me, hey Hamaduru, now what would I do when I have the stress about paying this car after buying this thing? See, we have to go back to the cause. You have to go back to the cause, not the result all the time, especially in the Buddhist teachings. But in the sciences, they always look at the result. It's okay. Science is more likely about the material culture. But in the Buddhist teachings, Buddha always asks us to look at the cause of anything, and then you will not let that happen again. You are not going to make yourself into problem. Right? So that's a very good way. That's we call paticca or causality or dependent origination. I think that is what exists in all the teachings of the Buddha, not even this one, all the teachings. So now what we need to remind ourselves is, do we always look for the cause of any issue when you're going to solve the problem? When we stuck in a problem, do we always look at the cause of that issue, or we just go by the result? Have we ever looked at the cause of the issue, cause of the problems, right? So that is something we need to think about. We need to revisit our understanding about our methods and ways of solving problems. So it is about looking at the cause and then the effect. And also, effect also causes the cause at the end. Cause causes the effect, effect causes the cause, and cause vice versa. This is not something a one-way thing, right? But basically, the Buddha's main teaching, which is seen across all his teaching, is the paticca, which you call the dependent origination, that we need to look at the cause of anything to find a solution. That is how he has given the Nibbana too, right? Four Noble Truths, right? There is how he has given that is the truth on dissatisfaction, the cause of the dissatisfaction, the truth about the cause of dissatisfaction, and then the cessation of the dissatisfaction, and then the path leading to the cessation of the dissatisfaction. So basically, he asks us to look at the cause. Why this happens to me? Why? Right? So why thing dates back to billions of lives, not something this life thing, right? So we believe in the rebirth. So if you are not believing in the rebirth, that means you are not into samadhi, right? Harmonious view. That is one part of the samadhi. So then when you believe in the rebirth, that you were not just come out of this life thing only, then whatever your things that you experience now and your expectations and your they don't just come from this life, from the genetic side, from your experiences, from your environment. They also, I think many things come from the past lives, right? So which means you can sometimes define your life from this life experiences alone. So that means you have to go to the course. Make sense?
But you can't go to the course without knowing the result. So at least you must have an idea as to what will.
No, you are experiencing the result,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, but then you are doing it after the result has been experienced.
Oh, every case has to be, looked at from its different, unique perspective.
You can think about the result, what will happen, and then go to the course, right?
No, because you experience a result, you look at the cause, right?
So after the result.
No, usually, when you experience a result, then of course you think you are stuck, you are troubled by this thing. Then Buddha asks us to, find a solution based on the cause of this result. So that doesn't mean that we are largely ignoring the result, because we have the result at hand. But then that prompts us to look at the cause of why this happened, so we can minimize, so we cannot let this happen again.
This happen again.
Yes.
Yeah.
That doesn't mean that we are going to completely, largely ignore the result. We need the result to know what happened. Because of the result, we know we are stuck, we are troubled by this thing, right?
Yeah, you can avoid that kind of thing.
Yes. But when you plan a methodology, a solution for the same problem in the future, we have to focus more on the cause of the problem. That is going over the result. Because result is what you already know, right? Then you're going to find out a better solution based on the cause of that result, right? That doesn't mean that we're going to ignore the result. Okay? So let's share all the good karmas with the departed relatives and the deities. Idamme ñāti nang hotu sukita huntu ñātayo. Idamme ñāti nang hotu sukita huntu ñātayo. Idamme ñāti nang hotu sukita huntu ñātayo. Ettavata ca amhehi sambatang punya sampadang sabbe deva anumodantu samba sampatti sindhya. Ettavata ca amhehi sambatang punya sampadang sabbe bhuta anumodantu samba sampatti sindhya. Ettavata ca amhehi sambatang punya sampadang sabbe satta anumodantu samba sampatti siddhya. Ākāsattha ca bummattha deva naga puññantang anumoditvā cirang rakkhaṅtu loka sāsanang. Ākāsattha ca bummattha deva naga mahiddhika puññantang anumoditvā cirang rakkhaṅtu desanang. Ākāsattha ca bummattha deva naga mahiddhika puññantang anumoditvā cirang rakkhaṅtu maṅ paranti. Okay, let's make a great wish. May all the good karmas we've been accumulating so far help all of us to attain the supreme bliss of Nibbana as well. Now I'm going to bless you with a couple more stanzas. Abhivādana sīlissa niccang vaddhā pacāyino cattaro dhamma vaddhanti āyuvanno sukhaṃ balang āyurārogya sampatti sagga sampatti mevaca ato nibbāna sampatti iminate saminjatu. Okay.